Now, if our government really wanted to stop poisonous division, here's something it should get stuck into instead of censoring Twitter. The Prime Minister today started to walk the Kokoda track in Papua New Guinea in honour of the Anzacs who fought and died there ahead of Anzac Day. Meanwhile, back home, a group called Teachers for Palestine is preaching against Anzac Day to our kids. His Victorian branch says they're not going to glorify the day, they'll resist it. They want to teach how Anzacs, in fact, they were almost all New Zealanders, killed a reported 40 Palestinians in World War One. This was after a Palestinian from a particular village murdered one of the sergeants, the village wouldn't say who, and a killing spree. Absolutely terrible. There was compensation paid. But does this one event truly define the whole Anzac history? Well, this group said, yes, well, it's important that students know the Anzacs left a long and violent historical imprint in Palestine, which we actually helped liberate from the Ottomans, by the way, the Turks. This is a legacy to dismantle, not to glorify. And they also want to teach kids about the so-called frontier wars with Aborigines, the mistreatment of returned soldiers, Australian war crimes in Afghanistan, anything bad really it seems, and to resist government-funded mystification about Australia's role in wars, which they say crowds out Australia's role in imperialism. I mean, give me a break. As it happens, Senator James Paterson, the opposition's Home Affairs spokesman, he's at least giving a speech tonight warning about exactly this kind of division, which again, the Albanese government's not tackling. Paterson says even the government is warning now about a possible war, China. But how are we going to find the soldiers and sailors and airmen to fight for this country when our shared sense of national identity is now so under pressure? I spoke to Senator James Paterson a short while ago. James Paterson, thank you so much for your time. Look, before I get to Teachers for Palestine, your speech, you warn in, a good speech by the way, you warn in it that past wars have seen politicians here demand conscription for the defence of the nation. The threat was so grave. Forcing people to fight Australia, big call. The next time we might have to contemplate that will be possibly, well, it could be in our lifetime, James. Could actually be quite soon. You don't know. But you worry that we're not united enough for that to be even thought about. Why is that?
Andrew, anyone who studied Australian history will understand that conscription was one of the most divisive issues in the 20th century. On 3 separate occasions, we either went to public ballots about it or had enormously divisive internal debates about it. And I never want to see our country divided like that again. And I never want to see a government force people against their conscience to fight in a war that they don't want to. But if we want to avoid that in the future, given the dark clouds ahead, that demands political leadership now and some tough leadership now. We have to make voluntary service in the Australian Defence Force much more attractive so that we solve the recruitment and retention crisis currently facing the ADF. And we also have to spend the money we need to now to acquire the capability we need now to hopefully deter and prevent conflict by being credible and being powerful. And unfortunately, on all of those fronts, the Albanese government is failing. They're going to wait 10 years before they spend anything meaningful on defence instead of today when we need it.
Yeah, but there's also a wider cultural issue, isn't there? The lack of patriotism, the lack of love for Australia, the lack of a sense of what we're all here for. You want people to volunteer to fight for this country, but just right now we've got more than 4,000 fewer people in the armed forces than we want, than we need, and that's when the armed forces are just very small, too small. What's the problem here?
Well, that's exactly right, Andrew. I think there's 2 issues. One is a kind of policy issue that we can solve. We have to make service in the ADF more attractive by making it more flexible and more fitting with modern life. You shouldn't have to move to the other side of the country, take your spouse out of their work, move your kids out of school in order to defend your country. That has to end, and we have to make it more flexible. And our Shadow Minister for Defence, Andrew Hastie, will have more to say about that. But as you say, there's a more fundamental underlying cultural problem here, which is we've lost a sense of self-belief, we've lost a sense of self-confidence. We don't teach young people that our country is worth anything, let alone worth defending. And when we advertise to go and sign up to serve in the ADF, it's all about you. It's all about self-actualisation. It's all about your personal journey and growth. It's not about serving our country or our cause, and that needs to change. We need to reinstill that sense of belief in our own country and our own goodness if we're ever going to inspire a generation to sign up and serve.
Well, on that very point, James, here you are making your speech just at the same time that a group called Teachers for Palestine says it wants to teach students about Anzac Day in their way. They want to teach that Anzacs, in fact, most of them were New Zealanders, committed a war crime against Palestinians more than 100 years ago. That's got to be taught, they say. The Anzac legacy must be dismantled, not glorified. The Anzacs were conscripted in service of the colonisers. I mean, what is going on here?
Andrew, on the one hand, this is offensive, ahistorical nonsense. It is not an accurate reflection of our history or of Anzac Day. But on the other, it's a deeply dangerous attempt to dismantle one of the last unifying symbols of nationhood in Australia. You know, long after people have trashed our flag, trashed our constitution, trashed our anthem, Anzac Day, and Australia Day as well, Anzac Day is one of those things that has almost universal support, almost universal belief, no matter you're on the left of politics or the right, whether you came here recently or a long time ago. Australians rally around this. And I think it's particularly insidious that even that institution is now under attack, and there are people trying to undermine that, and it is storing up a whole lot of trouble for us in the future. It is going to raise a generation of people who don't believe there's anything good about our country, anything good about our history, and no nation can prosper, let alone survive in a contested geopolitical environment without any belief in itself.
I think that's absolutely right. I was wondering, in fact, if the Prime Minister's wasting a few days walking up and down the Kokoda track, but perhaps paying this tribute to soldiers who fought and died there is exactly the right thing he should be doing. I don't know. It seems to me that's probably the case.